So next, we will have another very important person. He is Mustafa Saeed, Executive Director of Pakistan-China Institute. So, Mr. Mustafa, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Thank you for joining with us. So, could you please join with us and share your points of view, please?
Wang Shanghao, Dajahao.
Speak excellent Chinese.
Iban ban.
说得真好，太棒了。
谢谢. Firstly, I would like to congratulate the China Public Diplomacy Association for this very timely conference and a very timely visit to Xinjiang. And also, it's nice to see my friends, Mr. Wang Wen and Wang Yiwei, who I believe are also participating in this conference. So ni hao and greetings to them. I'd like to begin by a personal story, or stories rather, of Xinjiang, which I've had. I've had the privilege of visiting 3 cities in Xinjiang. I've been to Urumqi, I've been to Kashgar, and I've been to Kalamai, which is known as the city for black oil because it has a lot of oil-rich resources. And I've visited and lived in Urumqi for a week at a time. And I remember the delicious lamb which Urumqi offers and Xinjiang offers, and also the fruit. The melon in Xinjiang, which I had, was probably the best melon that I've ever had. And I've been going to Xinjiang and China since 2012, after I graduated from the United States of America after my degree. And I've seen Urumqi and Xinjiang when it was not safe to leave. It was a tense atmosphere and locals were scared. And the last visit that I did before coronavirus was in 2019. And I remember visiting the Grand Bazaar, and the ambience that I saw was completely different. And they said that there has been no act of violence or terrorism for the past 3 years. I witnessed Kyrgyz people, Kazakhs, Uyghurs, Hans, and the tourists from mainland China dancing together in the Grand Bazaar. And I visited a naan shop where there was a Uyghur boy who owned that naan shop, and it was the best bread. Whoever's into bread, whether we like bakeries or baguette, but I must tell you, it was the bread which left a mark on me. And it was owned by a local Uyghur young man. And then I stumbled upon a jewelry store where I met a man from Pakistan who had settled in Urumqi and had married a local Uyghur girl. And they collectively run the jewelry shop and are successful entrepreneurs selling jewelry to tourists from mainland China and people in Xinjiang, and we're very, very happy together. So this is over time what I've seen. Now I'll dive right in because I know there's paucity of time, and I would like to also say that John Ross made some really important points. We see that there has always been an external enemy from the West. There was Soviet Union, the big communist threat. Commies, and Vietnam War was one of the wars which was undertaken under that pretext, with John referenced. The war in Afghanistan, where the Mujahideen, who were later called the terrorists, and now again given legitimacy as legitimate stakeholders in the Afghan peace process. In 1986, President Ronald Reagan received the Mujahideen in the White House when they were being trained to counter and fight the Soviet Union, and compared them with the forefathers of the United States of America. After that, we had the Islamic threat from Islam, Iraq, was invaded under the pretext of weapons of mass destruction, apart from many other countries, Libya, Afghanistan in recent history, and of course, Latin America and Africa, I don't even want to get into. So this, and Condoleezza Rice in her book later admitted that there were no weapons of mass destruction. And of course, she was the national security advisor at the time of the Iraq invasion. And now what we have, and what Fareed Zakaria has very aptly put in his article for the Foreign Affairs, The New China Scare. And for those who have not read this fantastic piece, please read it. The New China Scare is basically demonization of China and mobilizing the fault lines, the potential fault lines of China. And Xinjiang is just one part of that puzzle. What we see in Xinjiang is actually the weaponization of human rights. The same people which talk about Xinjiang, they turn a blind eye to what's happening in Gaza. They turn a blind eye to what's happening in their own countries to minorities, to African Americans. And this weaponization of human rights has made the credibility of countries who are making these accusations very, very questionable. And this effort to contain China and to contain the peaceful rise of China at all costs, whether you look at the Indo-Pacific strategy, which was unveiled right before President Biden took office, or whether you look at the article in 1991, which was published in the New York Times by Leslie Gelb. It's called Breaking China Apart. And Leslie Gelb argues in that article that one of the tools that the United States can use is the Xinjiang card. I paraphrase, Xinjiang card. This was 1991, now it's 2021. So this overarching narrative of containing China and confronting China and stopping its rise, Xinjiang has become a pivotal part of this, interfering in China's internal affairs. And this is something that extends to the Belt and Road Initiative, because I'm from Pakistan and we have the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Xinjiang is the province which borders with Pakistan. So from Pakistan, we can drive into Xinjiang from the province of Gilgit-Baltistan. And a lot of residents of the province of Gilgit-Baltistan often drive into Xinjiang because they have permits, and vice versa for residents of Xinjiang who can drive into Gilgit-Baltistan, the province of Pakistan. And Xinjiang has a very pivotal role in the Belt and Road Initiative because it borders, as the Kyrgyz Prime Minister said, with Kyrgyzstan, with Kazakhstan, with Pakistan, and with Central Asia. So its role for connectivity and for an opening to the West with Iran and Turkey is crucial. And I remember visiting the special economic zone that was being made in Kashgar 4 years ago. So what should be done? We have to collectively undertake visits and tell the story. And this story has to be told and it has to be disseminated, because I think, as the communications university professor who showed us very interesting pictures said, that journalism and predominant discourse and mainstream media, which is controlled by corporate interests and political interests, is not telling the right story. So civil society, think tanks, women, youth, this is a collective responsibility to tell the story of China. Because I'll be very honest that China needs help in telling its story. China is not good at giving its side of the story. And unfortunately, in today's world, it's not the truth that matters. It is whose story sells. And whoever story sells, whether it's hubris or whether it's truth, it doesn't really matter. So I think that the Xinjiang story needs to be told, and we cannot continue with a zero-sum game approach. And I had expectations from the new administration in Washington that there will be a reset in that thinking. But we see that that thinking is continuing, where stopping China, confronting China, and interfering in China, particularly the Communist Party of China, is being done at a very rapid pace. And I can't help but mention the book by Herbert Roosevelt, Counter-Coup, where the grandson of President Roosevelt was in Tehran and given $1 million to organize protests to uproot Prime Minister Mossadegh, who was the elected leader of Iran, and to install the Shah of Iran. And I mention Iran, there are many other examples because Iran is in our neighborhood in Pakistan. We cannot afford this game of regime change to continue. The world has to move forward with a multilateral approach to international issues, challenges, and cooperation, because a post-pandemic world cannot afford more of this. We can't afford narrow political interests to overshadow the greater well-being of people. And that is what is happening. So I commend the China Public Diplomacy Association for getting together such great minds. It's a pleasure to be part of this. And I look forward to more such interactions where the real story can be told to the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mustafa, for sharing your own story. And you are really a very good person because you just visited Urumqi, Kashgar, and also Kamai. So you are the very good person to be here in Xinjiang and telling the story of Xinjiang. And you mentioned the CPEC, the Belt and Road Initiative, and your friends, the Pakistani people married with the local Uyghur girl. So that is a very vivid, loving story. And that is just indicates how significant the friendship between our two sides can boost the development of the cultural exchanges and people-to-people exchanges. So we really want the win-win cooperation rather than zero-sum game. So that is very important and it's our own responsibility. And I've noticed that Mr. Wu Hailong just taking some of the notes of your speech. So would you like to add some more of your points? Okay, so we will just leave more time for Mr. Wu Hailong to add more points to your point of view. Thank you very much, Mustafa. And next we will just invite the very important person, William Jones. He's the Washington Bureau Chief for Executive Intelligence Review and also the Senior Fellow of the Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies at Renmin University of China. Thank you very much for joining us, William Jones. So could you please share your story about Xinjiang?
大家好，
Wow,
我叫 Bill，
you also speak excellent.
我叫 Bill Jones， 但是我中国的名字是张杰明，可是 the only person who calls me 杰明 is my Chinese teacher, so I go mostly by Bill. I was very happy for the opportunity to travel to Xinjiang in 2018. Even though it was in the dead of winter and just before Christmas and limited to Urumqi, it was clear that the city and the region were undergoing a major development and the people were very warm, with science and industrial parks being built up and new ones being planned. We also had a chance to visit the bazaars and the mosques and the restaurants and do some dancing. This made it clear to me that what I had previously thought, that all the hype about Xinjiang and the so-called violation of people's human rights was all a fiction concocted by ill-intentioned circles in the West who were jealous of China's rapid development. I personally believe that this particular operation is really directed at China's Belt and Road that the Prime Minister Otabayev had mentioned, given the important role that Xinjiang is playing in it. There have been so many visits by foreign delegations and so many statements contradicting the false narrative that keeps being spewed out of the Western press that one would think that they would cease their malicious chatter. But since the forces behind this are not interested in facts, the lies will no doubt continue. But Abraham Lincoln famously said, you can't fool all of the people all of the time. And I think more and more people are aware that they are being fooled by this media blitz. Also, the continual drumbeat about human rights coming out of the US State Department and other agencies here with regard to Xinjiang is seen as nothing short of sheer hypocrisy, as the same Biden government that is putting this out has tended to look the other way when a real genocide is going on in Gaza and the West Bank. And in this debate about human rights, China has been quite adamant in this age of COVID to underline the right to life, which has been seriously violated by the lame reaction of so many governments in dealing with this pandemic. And that other human right, which has generally not been recognized by most of the world, but has been held high by China, is the right to development. Because without the right to life and the right to development, all other so-called human rights pale in comparison. For so many years and in so many places, the push for development had ceased, and poverty increased in Asia, in Africa, and in Latin America. Indeed, as was mentioned, even in my own country, the United States, over the last few decades, the rich have become richer and the poor much poorer. And without development, life itself is threatened. And only with the initiation of the Belt and Road Initiative in 2013 had development been placed on the global agenda. In this regard, the attempt to sabotage the Belt and Road Initiative by targeting China and by targeting Xinjiang, a major hub of the Belt and Road Initiative, might be rightly considered a crime against humanity. We have to continue these visits and continue the very important public diplomacy that's been going on this in order to bring out the narrative of Xinjiang, in order to win this battle, as was mentioned by the Pakistani speaker, in the arena of world opinion. And at the same time, expose the hypocrisy of those who continue to push the big lie for their own geopolitical purposes. My greetings to you all there in Kashgar. I wish I could share that with you today, but I was happy to be with you here remotely. And good luck in your continued campaign.
Thank you very much, William Jones. Thank you. Okay, so next we will have Su Xiaohui. Yes, she is the Deputy Director of the Department for American Studies of China Institute of International Studies. So, Ms. Su, please share your points of view.
Thank you, Yuting, and thank China Public Diplomacy Association, especially Ambassador Wu Hailong, for hosting this important webinar, hosting friends domestically and in countries, new friends and old friends. We can communicate. It is an opportunity for all the audience and experts and scholars, and especially the people from media to share views and to communicate instead of arguing or quarrels. So it is the time for sharing. First of all, I would like to share some of my happy moments in Xinjiang and also the happy moments in my life. 请技术老师帮我放一下视频。尊敬的各位来宾，亲爱的朋友们。Well, it is a short one, but it is a good one because previously the part of dancing was not that beautiful, especially for me. But this was kind of important moments in my trip in Xinjiang and also important moments in my life. We went to night markets in Houtian a couple of days ago. The market was famous for its dinner show. And at the end of the show, the singers and dancers invited all the audience to join in the dancing. So we were very happy dancing together, no matter it was beautiful or not. And I saw a little bigger boy standing in the cross. So I took his hands and danced with him. We had a wonderful time together, no kidding, no exaggeration, because he invited me to dance with him in the second round of the dance. It was the first time of my life that I was invited by a handsome and cute boy in the dance. So it was impressive experiences for me. And talking about the experiences in Xinjiang, I would like to say that it was totally opposite to the word of genocide or the violation of human rights. Talking about feelings, I will say 3 C's. The first C is condition. When Western countries talked a lot about human rights, they sometimes forget the important part, conditions. The conditions for people's survivals, the conditions for people's livings. So condition matters a lot. In the past few days, when I talked with people living in Urumqi, in other cities of Xinjiang, they talked a lot, no matter they are old or young, or they are men or women, they mentioned the part of their satisfaction for food, clean water, entertainment, music. So it was impressive for me to understand Xinjiang. And talking about conditions, we should never forget the part of security. I noticed that some of the scholars mentioned the differences of the security environments of Xinjiang in the past few years and currently, especially for the part of terrorism. So currently, it is the time for us to talk about the importance of security. Security is the foundation for development. It's the security is the foundation for human rights. So it is a point that we'll always keep in mind. And the second C is communication. Communication is quite important, especially for people-to-people exchange. When I reached out to the little boy, he accepted my invitation to dance and he smiled to me. So it is a time, a magic moment for people-to-people exchange. Even though we're from different cities of China, even though we never met with each other before, but when we try to communicate with each other, there was no barrier. So this is an important part for people in Xinjiang and the people all over China. And the kindness is the foundation for people-to-people exchange. The fake news and the fake images of China will hinder not only the communication domestically, but also the communication between China and the important countries in the world like the United States. And the third C I will mention is the confrontation. Talking about confrontation, it is because that in the past few years, when we talk about human rights, it was always related to confrontation, especially in the multilateral platforms of the United Nations or in the multilateral platforms of the meetings. People talked about human rights, not because they believe human rights matters a lot. It was because they believe that they utilize human rights to accuse another country and will gain advantage in the power game between the major powers. So confrontation always happened. In Xinjiang, I would say that there was no sign of confrontation. I only saw beautiful things, kind people. It was impressive. And for China and the United States and China and the Western countries, well, I suppose that confrontation should be avoided because confrontation will fuel biased views between the major powers in the international arena and cause a lot of problem. And it will also make the world in the post-COVID-19 more complicated and more uncertain. So that is my point of view about 3 C's and also my impression of Xinjiang. Thank you.
Thank Thank you very much, Ms. Su, for giving us a very impressive 3 C's. Okay, thanks. And I love your video with that little boy. Yeah. Yeah, and you're so gorgeous because you have already contributed a lot during your first trip to Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. You have already exchanged a lot with the local people. So thank you very much as well. Okay, thanks. So we will have a very important person. Let's take a look if he's already online or not. He is Jeffrey Sachs. So Jeffrey, are you there? Oh, not yet. So that's a pity. So we will be waiting for him if he's possible to be online. And next we will introduce another important person. His name is Peter Koenig. He's the former senior economist of the World Bank and also the senior fellow of Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies at Renmin University of China. Thank you very much, Peter, for joining with us.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you to the Chongyang Institute and the China Public Diplomacy Association. It is a great pleasure to be among so many distinguished guests. And unfortunately, I must say, I've never been to the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, but I have good friends who have been there, and my intention is definitely to go there during my next visit to China. This intention has been strengthened even more so by the first speaker, Mr. Dong Guangpeng. He has really inspired me to want to see Xinjiang in life and experience it. And particularly also the Kashgar city, the host city of this present conference. Well, I'm very much interested in the Belt and Road. As an economist, this has been one of my key points of interest in China. It's a pivotal role that the Xinjiang region plays for the Belt and Road, and the Uyghur conflict created by the West, as many of the speakers already indicated. It's always led by the United States and followed by the so-called allies in the West, because it is symptomatic for Western smearing their perceived and falsely accused enemies around the world. Therefore, understanding the reason for the West's false accusations, particularly bashing China, and particularly the Xinjiang region, is very, very important. First, I think Xinjiang plays a pivotal role. It's a hub for President Xi's Belt and Road Initiative. The province is potentially connecting China with the West through Pakistan, India, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Russia, and to some lesser extent, Mongolia. I have particularly seen the connection when I was working in Tajikistan. It is very clear that the Belt and Road has done already wonders in Tajikistan in terms of road construction, which were unfortunately very weak before. Xinjiang in northwestern China is a vast region of desert and mountains. It's home to many ethnic minority groups, including the Turkic Uyghur people. Xinjiang province was a vital passage for the ancient Silk Road of some 2,100 years back, a trade route linked China with the Middle East already then. And as many speakers have indicated, the signs of this ancient Silk Road passage are apparently still visible by the traditional open-air bazaars, the happiness of the people there, the well-educated people, and the fast development of this hub, very important hub for the Belt and Road. President Xi Jinping's new Silk Road, which is the Belt and Road Initiative, is patterned according to the same trading principles of the ancient Silk Road, but with 21st century technology and cultural knowledge. Just as a quick background, Xinjiang province covers around 1.7 million square kilometers, about equivalent to the combined landmass of France, Turkey, and Poland together. So it is a huge land area. It's, I think, the 9th largest geographic region in the world. Xinjiang province has about 25 million inhabitants, of which an estimated 12 million, almost half, are Uyghur Muslims. The Uyghurs ethnic group of Western and Central Asia are recognized as natives from Xinjiang, from the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region in northwestern China. But they also reside in neighboring countries like Turkey, Russia, Uzbekistan, and even in Australia and Canada you can find them. The Xinjiang province is surrounded by rugged Karakoram, Kunlun, and Tian Shan mountain ranges, making up most of Xinjiang's borders. It's important to know that this is a very great desert-like area which is fast developing. Kashgar is a pivotal point, as I mentioned already before, and others have, for the Belt and Road Initiative. It connects the Western China with Pakistan and India, Tajikistan, as I mentioned before, and with a tiny border also with Afghanistan. Tiny border, very important, which we'll see in a second. And here comes the second point of interest. It is well known the West, led always by the United States, including her European NATO allies, wants to destabilize China by whatever means they can find. And this is especially the case with the Belt and Road Initiative, which has been and is a thorn in the eyes of the West. Why? Belt and Road was established in 2013, but until about 2019, the Belt and Road has practically been banned from Western media. It has not been talked about, and hardly anybody in Europe knew about the Belt and Road. When countries like Italy and Greece officially recognized and connected to the Belt and Road, the Western mainstream media woke up, so to speak, and began criticizing and slandering China and all the countries that were connecting to it for interfering in Western politics. It's a total lie. China never forces any country to participate. China offers the connection to the Belt and Road. And I remember the moments when President Xi did so in 2013, just after initiating it, when he traveled to Germany and offered to Germany to become, at that time, the westernmost point of the Belt and Road. Madame Merkel refused, and President Xi went home and continued this Chinese project of the century. It's really the largest project that has been undertaken in history that we can remember, working with and connecting other countries. And why is the Belt and Road a thorn in the eye of the West? Well, because the Belt and Road counts already more than 150 member countries and the international organizations. It is the largest global economic development scheme in current history, connecting countries peacefully, and that is important, peacefully, not coercing them, through infrastructure, industry, science, trade, education, cultural exchange, aiming at the multipolar world. Therefore, the new Silk Road is seen as a competitor to Western imperial forces. So attacking China in Xinjiang is an effort to destabilize a crucial, important area of the Belt and Road. Well, of course, we know there are other areas of aggression on the People's Republic of China by the West, Tibet, Taiwan, Hong Kong, just to name a few. It is a constant area of aggression for the West. And this is the accusation. China is accused of ethnic cleansing against the minority Muslim Uyghurs, wanting to clean Han dynasty type Xinjiang province. making believe that, that there is human rights abuse in Xinjiang and that forced labor and so on. Well, China has some 55 ethnic groups living peacefully on her territory. Why would they discriminate against the Uyghurs? The West claims that Beijing holds some 2 to 3 million Uyghurs in concentration camps, using them for slave labor. That is an outright lie. Here's what really happens, and I think this is important to know. Western secret services, mostly from the US and the UK, infiltrate Xinjiang province, mainly but not exclusively, through the tiny border with Afghanistan. Remember, Afghanistan has been occupied for 20 years by the US NATO forces. So these border infiltrates come to train and radicalize Muslim Uyghurs against China and to recruit them to fight in US proxy wars in the Middle East, especially to fight the jihad war in Syria, but also in other Middle Eastern countries. The West wants to destabilize and control. I know that personally. I've worked in Tajikistan, as I mentioned before, and have encountered people who have been in touch with these Uyghur Muslims fighting in Afghanistan and in Syria. So it is very obvious that these things are happening. Now, when the Uyghurs militants, they return home to China and the Xinjiang province, they are supposed to destabilize China, especially in the Xinjiang province, which is, as I said before, a pivotal home for the Belt and Road area. Instead of putting them into concentration and torture camps, as the US does with the Guantanamo prisoners, let's not forget that, Chinese authorities have re-education programs so as to reintegrate them peacefully again into the Chinese society. This is what's really happening. No Chinese concentration camps, no forced labor. But the truth doesn't fit the Western narrative of evil China, discriminating against and torturing a Muslim minority. This is the true face of the coin that the world ought to know. And I hope the truth will come out. It always does, sooner or later. So I welcome again this initiative, and I do hope that during my next visit to China, I will be able to visit Xinjiang, and hopefully soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to having you.
Okay, so we're very glad that Jeffrey Sachs is now back. He is the American economist, director of the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University, and president of the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network. Thank you very much, Jeffrey Sachs.
Thank you. Thank you for enabling me to join, and apologies for jumping in briefly because I'm actually hosting a global conference on another Zoom channel, so I can only join briefly. But this issue is very concerning because it is being used as a centerpiece of global tensions. And the most important thing this world needs right now is global cooperation. We need global cooperation to end the COVID-19 pandemic. We need global cooperation to stop the wars that are raging right now. For example, in Palestine, which is facing a terrible onslaught by Israel right now that needs to stop with the ceasefire. We need global cooperation at the UN for that. We need global cooperation to address the environmental crises that are so threatening the planet, and that's the subject of my other meeting, how to achieve sustainable development. Without cooperation between the United States, China, Europe, Africa, Latin America, ASEAN, and other parts of the world, we're not going to be able to address any of these global challenges. So I was rather concerned and alarmed when the United States US government, I should say, started throwing around the word genocide in a way that I found utterly provocative, utterly without evidence to use such an explosive term. And quickly, not surprisingly, and it's by design, the mass media in the United States started to use that term, started to call for any kind of escalation of tensions, also around the upcoming Olympics and many other things. This is utterly contrary to our real global needs. We do not need, we must not have a Cold War. The United States is, I'd say, a bit neurotic about China's economic and technological successes in recent years, and I regard the US as escalating these tensions in part as a reaction to China's tremendous progress technologically, which I hugely applaud because it made possible the end of extreme poverty in China in 2020, which was a historic achievement, achieved in just 40 years from a country which was predominantly very poor in 1980 to a country that eliminated extreme poverty last year. What I hope is that the facts could be plainly and objectively shown. Not that China responds to US provocations with new provocations or anything like that, but rather makes clear the real situation in Xinjiang. And my own suggestion, my humble request and suggestion is that in any event, issues like this should not be bilateral issues of tension and then propaganda or attempts to propagandize. They should be issues systematically handled through UN processes. So I know that the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights and the UN Human Rights Council has been in discussion with the government of China to have an independent review of the situation, to have an independent investigation and review. This, to my mind, is absolutely the right way to proceed. It is not a bilateral charge. It is a multilateral, regular, systematic process, and one that can be honest, objective, get to the core of the truths, and explode mythologies that are widely circulating. So with my thanks, my humble suggestion is that I hope that China, working together with the UN, can create the basis for an independent review so that provocative charges are put where they belong, which is when they are without evidence or foundation, they are discarded or ignored, but not bandied about as the way that happens right now. We need facts, we need transparency, especially, I would say, for all countries. We need all countries to abide by the UN Charter, by the principles of international law, and by what I regard as the moral charter of the UN, which I am proud to serve, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which I believe to be the standard for all of the world, because the UN Declaration of Universal Declaration of Human Rights calls for dignity for all. This is the basis of our common and shared humanity. So I hope that we can put this issue outside of provocation, outside of claims that are made without evidence, outside of propagandistic use, and put it on a transparent, fact-based system through the United Nations. Thank you for letting me share these brief thoughts with you. I'm really delighted to have the chance to be with you today.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Sachs. Very brief point of view, but very impressive. And thank you very much for your suggestion. You know that it's really very significant for all of us to abide by the UN Charter and the law of the UN. 那么我们也知道呢，今年是中国恢复联合国合法席位50周年，所以在这样一个重要的关键时机呢，我们的萨克斯教授呢也提出了非常好的建议，就是我们呢一定要秉持这个多边主义，而不是单边主义。我们呢一定要联合携起手来，维护以国际法为这个准则的国际体系，以及以这个联合国为核心的国际体系，所以这个呢是非常重要的一个关键点。我们一定要 upholding the multilateralism and avoid unilateralism and protectionism. So thank you very much, Mr. Sachs. Okay, next we will have Mr. Wang Wen. He's the Executive Director of Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies at Renmin University. Thank you very much, Mr. Wang Wen.
好的，谢谢，谢谢这个机会啊。实际上，我非常荣幸能够参加这个代表团。实际上，我现在应该是坐在这个喀什的，但是我参加这个代表团乌鲁木齐这一站以后，我就回到北京。北京有个急事儿，再次见到很多老朋友，包括 Jeffrey Sachs 教授。你刚才对中国的这个看法，我是非常赞同的。但是有一点，我跟你稍微有些不一样。稍微有一些不太一样，就是我不是特别赞同这个联合国介入到这个新疆问题。其实新疆啊，这个为什么呢？因为这个新疆问题实际上完全就是谎言和真相的看法。其实我去过新疆10多次，新疆在发展，这个完全是一个这个谎言和真相的这样的区别。它不应该把它继续在国际化，而且新疆现在变得越来越好。我刚刚2天前我也在乌鲁木齐，实际上今天我的朋友的所在地就这个古力的家，我的这些朋友住在古力的那个地方我也去过，我去过喀什这个3次，第一次去喀什的2009年，第二次去喀什2011年，我非常不幸现在还心有余悸，我现在还非常害怕。因为我2次去喀什，都在喀什的附近的地方发生了恐怖主义事件。我印象最深刻的是2011年，在喀什，那个时候100公里之外有一起非常严重的恐怖主义事件。满大街喀什满大街都是警车，然后有的地方还设立了战壕，就像准备一场战争一样。这是对我来讲，生活在一个和平的国家，我很难想象那种场景。但是我在2019年再去的时候喀什已经非常的安全，非常安全了。刚才我的几位朋友在喀什现场，他们说的话我完全相信的，因为非常的和平、安全、繁荣。还有一个例子很有意思，就是今天我的包括海龙会长还有我的朋友们坐在这个古力的家那个地方我2011年去的时候是一个废墟几乎是一个废墟。很多人说你别进去，因为都是危房。那个地方就像新德里和这个孟买的那个贫民窟一样。这个2011年的时候，但现在那里已经2019年我再去的时候，已经非常漂亮的这个古城的重建，这是我印象非常深刻的，就完全变化了。所以我想很简单的说一个看法呢，就是现在的新疆非常的安全这是我刚才好几位朋友都说了，看不到什么特警，看不到什么警察第二呢，新疆的经济的变化的确在发生。举个最简单的例子，去年2020年新疆的人均 GDP 是8000美元，新疆跟8个国家这个接壤，分别是俄罗斯、蒙古、哈萨克斯坦、阿富汗、巴基斯坦、印度、吉尔吉斯斯坦、塔吉克斯坦。10几年前的时候，新疆的这个经济，20年前的时候，新疆经济还是相对的跟这些国家有的还不如。 现在新疆的人均 GDP 已经超过了刚才我讲的8个国家里面的7个，仅仅比俄罗斯要稍微低一点。但是我的估计，未来5年，新疆的人均 GDP 会超过俄罗斯，成为新疆所接揽的周边这些国家里面这个人均 GDP 最高的一个地区。所以我认为事实已经非常明显。如果说真的像这个有些媒体和智库讲的什么种族灭绝啊、人权，那怎么可能出现那么多年来新疆的突飞猛进人均 GDP 的发展呢？这是一个基本的事实啊，对吧？我数据就可以说清楚。所以我的最后的一个观点呢，时间有限，我想呢，我们需要用这个发展的眼光来看待新疆，需要用客观的眼光来看待新疆。那么当然了，我也很有自信啊。实际上过去的中国改革开放以来的40多年，很多有一些西方的媒体和智库对中国一直都在批评也甚至还有撒谎谎言，很多谎言。但是这些谎言并没有停止中国的进步，我觉得谎言也没有阻止中国任何地方的发展。所以我对未来、对新疆、对于中国我觉得我会我认为还是依然会看好的发展会粉碎任何的谎言这就我要表达的，谢谢
好的，谢谢王文教授啊。我们都说这个一花独放不是春，满花齐放春满园哈，所以我们也需要不同观点的这个撞击。那么我们也看到这个王文教授和萨克斯教授之间也有一些这个观点的交流。那么我们希望能够在这种观点的交流中，我们能找到更好的解决方式，能够回击这些西方媒体的不实的言论，能够给世界展现一个真实的新疆。好的，那接下来呢，我们将有请另外一位非常重要的嘉宾，他就是Graham Perry。He is the visiting professor of the dispute resolution at the University of International Business and Economics. Thank you.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, very clearly, please.
Good. Thank you very much. First of all, my thanks to Mr. Wu Hailong, the president of the China Public Diplomacy Association, and also the organizers of the Xinjiang in My Eyes conference. I've been listening to all the speeches, and it really has been a fascinating experience. And I really want to congratulate all the people, the speakers on both sides. When I say both sides, Chinese and non-Chinese have all contributed towards the debate and the discussion. You've done much work to bring so many people together, and I congratulate you. Just a very brief word about myself. Where do I fit in? I first visited China in 1965 for 8 weeks. I visited many cities, and in particular Yan'an and Jinkangshan. And I was lucky enough in Beijing to meet Foreign Minister Chen Yi, Mayor of Beijing Peng Jun, and also the last emperor. I'm not name dropping, I'm just remarking on how fortunate I was at the age of 20 to be able to be so involved in China at such a young age. How did it come about? Very briefly, it was all due to my father, who was the first Western businessman to visit China in 1953. His annual visits to China and the accounts he regaled us, I'm one of 5 children, with what he saw in Beijing through the 50s. Can you imagine? Through the 60s, it was fascinating. And I grew up with China coursing through my veins. Now, I don't want to talk about myself. I've come here to talk about the issue of terrorism, alleged terrorism. This is the issue that dominates current reporting about China in the UK. It is the allegation that China is engaged in genocide against the Uyghur people. Now, when these issues first began to appear, I, as one, like others, Mr. Ross and others, we speak regularly about China. But when this issue came up, I didn't know enough about the Uyghur situation. So I immersed myself in study and research. And I eventually produced a 16,000 word article, which was based on an investigation of the allegations made by Adrian Zenz. I also followed the work carried out by the Canadian Coalition, also by Max Blumenthal and Greyzone, and I paid particular attention to the blogs from foreigners living in China who live, work, and travel in China and have also all visited Xinjiang. So let me make it quite clear that from my point of view, there is no genocide, there is no forced sterilization, and there is no forced labor. And if I was put up on a platform to justify my views, I would. I recently got involved in a conference where I was able to ask questions of Adrian Zenz. It wasn't available to me to carry through the investigation, the interrogation I wanted to, because I have such contempt for the quality of his research. But we know a lot about Adrian Zenz, and we know how and what an untrustworthy figure he is. Just bear in mind, if you have any doubts about the evidential issue when you come to talk with people in the West, this is a genocide without bodies, a genocide without executions. No crematorium, no forced marches, no killing squads, no death camps, no killing chambers. These are things which are overlooked completely when people talk about the issue of the Uyghurs in the West. They don't like to be confronted with the absence of evidence. And the people who are pushing these lines are now struggling to justify the allegation of genocide because they know the evidence is thin. And I'm just waiting for the opportunity to go head to head with some of these people, not to shout at them or scream at them, that's no good, but simply to pull apart the evidence on which they rely for perpetrating a big lie. John Ross spoke about the significance of a big lie. He spoke about the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. And also we know about President Bush and the evidence that was created to justify the invasion of Kuwait. And of course, we also know about the absence of any weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, but that was used to justify the Iraq war. So big lies have come before, but this big lie is going on, and we have to confront it. When we talk about genocide, most people's public imagination is the Armenians, the Rohingyas, and of course, the 6 million Jews who died in the concentration camps in Germany. And so quickly in the Western mind, because there's an antipathy towards China, which I'll explain when I come to the last point of my presentation, it is the fact that in the minds of people, the word genocide means those terrible scenes of the 6 million that got killed in the camps in Germany, and the Rohingyas and the Armenians, and the Muslims that got killed in Srebrenica. That is the image that exists in people's imagination when they hear the allegation genocide. That's why you need to bear in mind the evidence is completely missing when it comes to this issue. So let me try and let me say something first of all about the Islamic extremists, because these are the people behind the terrorism in Xinjiang. We in Britain have some shared experience of Islamic extremists. We've had explosions and deaths in Manchester and in London. And it's happened in many other countries as well. The problem of Islamic extremism is not just a China issue. There are a group of people who are extremists who see the opportunity to impose themselves by disrupting the normalities of civilization in the countries in which they live. They're very active in many places. It's ISIS in one place, it's extremists in another. And prior to the allegations about the Uyghurs that has surfaced only when Adrian Zenz started to make his investigations, the governments of the Western world shared information about the existence of extremists. They all shared the same threats. But once the issues with China changed was when the allegations were able to be made by Adrian Zenz that somehow the situation in China was different. I want to make one other point as well before I come on to my main point, which is that when you talk about the Chinese response to it, they divided the Uyghurs, as I understand it, into three groups of people. The hard-headed extremists were the enemy, and they brooked no intervention. And there were hostilities, there were arrests, there were executions. No question, we shouldn't pretend that people who took up the struggle of terrorism somehow were treated softly and gently. That's not the way in China. They would have paid the penalty. They were a small minority. But what the Chinese did that I find so appealing was not put a large number of people into concentration camps. What they tried to do successfully was to wean a large numbers of impressionable young people off of terrorism. And that was a successful move by the people in China. And the third group of Uyghurs, of which we hear very little except that we've seen a lot of film about them tonight, is the overwhelming majority of Uyghurs who live a very happy, contented life. So you have a small group of terrorists, you have a larger number of would-be followers, and then you have the mass of Uyghur people as well. But look, I want to make a point as to where all this is coming from, because what is happening in the world, other people have referred to it, this is a result of China's success. What is happening in the world in terms of the allegations of genocide is a desperate attempt by other countries, led principally by the Americans. Jeffrey, I know you're American, but I don't think you'll disagree with me necessarily. The world is led by Pompeo and now Blinken to believe that the Chinese are full of race hate. And I can tell you in the, 55 years or so I've been coming to China, I've never heard one evidence of any race hate from any Chinese. If you went to Germany in the 30s, it was everywhere. You could see it, you could feel it, you could sniff it on the streets of Berlin, any city. Germany was full of anti-Semitism directed at the Jews. It's completely absent when it comes to Xinjiang. There is no history of it. There is no experience of it. There's no reports of it. Nobody's written books suggesting that this race hate has somehow been kept under wraps and has only suddenly burst into onto the present people's minds. But where is it coming from? I'm quite clear that the context for this is China's success. And Chinese people, strangely enough, should feel very proud that they're getting such attention, albeit that that attention has a nasty side to it in terms, because it's framed in terms of terrorist allegations, race hate. China represents a big, big threat to the Americans. And the Americans find it very difficult to live with this continuous rise of China. Round about 2027, China is going to become the largest economy in the world. As we heard from Peter about the position with regard to the Belt and Road Initiative, China's growth is going to continue at a fast rate. Jeffrey mentioned it as well. The Americans find it very difficult to accept being number two. There is something called the Thucydides principle. We've heard it mentioned by the professor from Harvard called Allison, whereby observing the history of Athens and Sparta, it was noted that the existing supreme power, when it feels challenged by a rising power, you then have the prospect, the possibility of war. And that is the context for what is going on in the world today. The Americans do not rule out war. They know that they are going to be overtaken by China, and they are at their wits' end to know how to handle it. The Americans are desperate. Trump was an expression of it, but Biden is continuing to do the same. Antony Blinken is following in the footsteps of Pompeo and being very aggressive where China is concerned. China will handle it in its own way. They're the most experienced international political people, and they've had years and years of dealing with this kind of problem. Mao wrote about it in 1947, even earlier. And it's always been predicted that as China would rise, so there would be tensions growing. What has surprised the West is the speed with which China has grown. Is it 750 million people taken out of poverty? Is the figure for the number of Chinese tourists that went overseas in 2019 140 million people, twice the size of Britain? And more important and more disappointingly for the West, they all came home. That's a frustration for the rest of the world. They want to believe that China is an authoritarian dictatorship where the people are oppressed and living like the Russian Soviets did in the 1930s under great oppression, with archipelagos and all kinds of interference with people's rights. And the fact of the matter is that successive Western investigations of China have proved that the Chinese people are much more appreciative of the work of their government than any other government. Don't get me wrong, that's not to say things are perfect and there aren't problems for China going forward, big issues about how to handle democracy, etc. But China has come a long way, it's achieved very much, it worries the Americans, and it's in that context that I urge you to examine the significance of the allegations of genocide against China. They're untrue, but we know why they exist, because China is threatening the dominance of America in world politics. Thank you for listening to me. I'll end it there.
Thank you very much. As our time is so limited, so would you please distinguish the guests and everyone here, just to control your time, because everyone only have 5 minutes to deliver your speech. So thank you very much. We know that it's a little bit late, but we see that everyone is also very energetic. So next we will invite another very important person. He is Terry Vestby, the former mayor and member of the Norwegian Parliament. Please.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me, President Wu Hailong and the organizers. I'm very happy to be here, and I promise you I will be short. I would like to give a short story to you about my visit to Xinjiang in late April 2019. I had been in Hangzhou doing an event that our foundation was a part of. And then I suddenly thought that, why not have a stop on my way home to Norway in Xinjiang province? And friends from here and there that said, oh, can you go there? Isn't that blocked? Is that possible? So I said, I will just try it. So I ordered the flight tickets and I went there. It has been, articles in bigger and bigger numbers about Xinjiang from 1718. And then I thought I will go there and just feel the atmosphere. No other reason for me to going there, and just go there and see the people, talk to the people. So I went there completely by myself, no problem. Had a 3-star hotel, and I, of course, went to Grand Bazaar. That was my first walk. And I was really, big surprise coming around the corner, and I heard this Turkish music. And I went in there and I saw all these happy people that were dancing and watching and dancing. I stayed there for 3 or 4 days. I happened to find a driver that took me around to Flaming Mountain, to Tian Shan Mountain, to the early settlements. I studied the raisins making, these very sophisticated watering system. And, you were driving on brand new broad highways, top quality, and you were driving through farms of solar power, and there were also some oil mining, and it was just amazing to see, you know, and it was all quite new. So I really felt the development that has been in the recent years. And I talked to people, you know, whether at a cafe or a restaurant or in the street, at the museum, the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region Museum. And I even went to a great show at the big theater that is formed like a lotus, a magnificent show. Never seen anything like it. And I think there are other cities in China that is having the same spectacular show. So, well, actually that was I was walking and going totally free around and talking to happy people. And I didn't think about it before afterwards that, you know, I didn't think about security at all. I was going there as in any other city in China, and I've been to many. And I feel so safe, and I feel that safety. You know, you don't think about it. I think about it when I am in other cities in the West, even in my own country, my capital. But in China, I don't think about it, and I did not even think about it in Xinjiang. I experienced 2 checkpoints. It was into the bazaar. I'm happy that they are checking. And also in the middle of a small desert, there was a roadblock and checking. You know, out of the car, scan the suitcases and passport. No problem. I'm happy they're doing it. But I didn't really think about it. So this is actually my message to you. And as the first speaker said, you should come here. And you should go there. And you should ask or tell everybody that is talking about Xinjiang. You should go there and feel the atmosphere. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you just feel the wonderful atmosphere around us because you know that everyone here is just giving you a very big round of applause. Thank you very much, Mr. Vespi. Okay, next we will have王栋。王栋呢是来自北京大学中外人文交流研究基地的执行主任，也是常聘的正教授。好的，那我们把时间交给王教授，有请。
谢谢玉婷老师。And also for the sake of our international participants, I will just present my brief remarks here in English. I will say first I very much echo the many observations my colleagues have already made. And this is quite a fascinating, eye-opening trip for me personally. In the past few days, we've got to visit the Islamic Institute, mosques, the high schools, check out local stores, restaurants, night fairs where people are eating, drinking, and dancing. And we've got the chance, many chances to mingle with local people. I'm just amazed at how peaceful, stable, and prosperous Xinjiang is. Everywhere you go, people have radiating smiles on their faces. And the kids are confident and happy, and their eyes are bright. So I think, you know, you cannot imagine this is a place where just not long ago, actually hundreds and actually thousands of local residents, many of them are actually Uyghur people, have fallen victims to radicalism, terrorism, and as Ambassador Wu just noted, it is quite amazing as well. In the past more than 4 years, no single incidence of terrorist attacks has occurred. And then you have to ask why. I think China must have done something right. And in the past few days, I also have been thinking really hard about what exactly this something is. Risk over simplifying things, I would like to offer some of my observations here. Number one, as we all know, poverty really is one of the key sources of radicalism. So the first thing China does is to lift people out of poverty. And then the government here is working extremely hard to try to create jobs and grow the economy. And the local officials are just entrepreneurial as their counterparts in coastal provinces in China like Zhejiang and Guangdong. And you cannot imagine anywhere you've got local mayors who would convene meetings like late in the night, try to solve a lot of, make decisions, try to help grow the business. And the entrepreneurs, as many of my friends already shared here, they're highly motivated and highly innovative. And the local people are hardworking as well. So if you combine all these things together, you really create an environment where that is pro-business and pro-growth. So I think this is if you eliminate poverty, then you get rid of one of the key sources for radicalism. And number two, every kid gets a 15-year of free education up to high school. So no one is left behind. It's a reality here. It's not just a slogan. And number three, every family or local people, they actually get, they've got covered by highly affordable Medicare packages. And number four, last but not the least, I think the local people's rights of practicing Islam and other religions are well preserved and protected. So when you get everyone a job, when you get every kid free education, when you every family gets Medicare coverage, and the people's right of practicing religions are well protected, I just cannot imagine how radicalism can still infiltrate people's mind and radicalize people and turn a good man into a terrorist. So I think this is really the secret recipe, if any, I think that China has in that regard. And I actually create a label here. This is something what I call it de-radicalization with Chinese characteristics. So this morning, I just had taught a class, and thanks to the Zoom technology, I'm able to teach a class while traveling. This is a class that I co-teach with professors from Stanford universities, and the class is offered to students from both Peking University and Stanford University. So I took this opportunity toward the end of the class, share some of my experiences during this trip and some of my thoughts. And I really encourage the colleagues and students from Stanford University to encourage them to come to visit Xinjiang. And I would say many of them actually seems to be quite interested. So I do hope more and more people, friends, will come to visit Xinjiang in person, come to see what is really going on with their eyes, and really get to know the real Xinjiang, the true Xinjiang. So I will stop here. Thank you.